Mr. Atkins.
Well, I'm pro-life.
That I'm a Kentucky native. I left after the terrorist attacks of 9/11. I was hired by the U.S. Secret Service. I spent 6 years as a member of the Presidential Protective Division. And then in 2008, I resigned my commission. I was recruited by a private company to go to work for the CIA. Did a bunch of stuff with them over the years, to include a tour in Afghanistan with Special Operations Forces to target al-Qaeda. And then in 2011, my career came full circle. I was asked by the Pentagon to lead a specialized unit at U.S. Naval Station in Guantanamo Bay, and was there that I came face-to-face with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. I was going to be a police officer in Louisville. That was my ambition, but the Secret Service hired me first. I'm the only criminal investigator in the race.
Mr. Atkins.
Well, I'm pro-life.
To join the United States Navy. Spent almost 6 years on active duty. Got to be a defense counsel down in Jacksonville, Florida. Went off and deployed with the Marines in the 24th Marine Expeditionary Unit on board the USS Iwo Jima. Came back, was a prosecutor at the Washington Navy Yard, kind of lead prosecutor for that area.
He and Mom are now Republicans as well. As for me, I left Kentucky shortly after the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, when hired by the U.S. Secret Service. I graduated first in class from the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Artesia, New Mexico, and first in class from the U.S. Secret Service Academy in Beltsville, Maryland.
To be the chief election official, I think I'm the best qualified person of all 8 people running in both parties. I'm the only one that actually has election experience. The biggest problem I see is that we don't have a photo ID requirement to vote in Kentucky elections. I'm going to work with both parties to get it done.
Mr. Atkins.
Well, I'm pro-life.
These experiences and more in my forthcoming autobiography, Charlie November, the world's first and only unauthorized first-person expose of the Secret Service, the CIA, the FBI, the Department of Defense, and the ongoing global war on terror, from the White House to the halls of Langley, to the corridors of the Pentagon, to the war zone of Afghanistan, to the detention facility at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Currently, I reside in Louisville with my wife, Kate, a native of Rocky Hill, Connecticut. Together, we are raising our children. Our son.
Neighboring states have it. I won't name names, but some other candidates for this office I think have been overselling the role of.
With assignments to the Dignitary Protected Division and the Presidential Protected Division, I traveled the country and the globe, safeguarding our president and various dignitaries and world leaders, to include a great many Democratic candidates. In 2008, I resigned my commission when recruited onto a contract with the Central Intelligence Agency. Working within the CIA's National Clandestine Service, I underwent extensive training at the CIA facility known as The Farm, and volunteered for a hazardous duty assignment in Afghanistan. In Bagram, I worked with Special Operations Forces to develop actionable intelligence.
Mr. Atkins.
Well, I'm pro-life.
For capture-kill raids against al-Qaeda, Taliban, the Haqqani Network, and associated groups. In 2011, I was asked by the Pentagon to lead a specialized unit at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, serving as director of one of the most sensitive and politically charged operations of the U.S. government. There, I came face-to-face with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the so-called mastermind of 9/11 and the terrorist personally responsible for the execution beheading of American journalist Daniel Pearl. My 9/11-centric career makes me the only American to have protected a wartime president, pursued terrorist actors in their own backyard of Afghanistan, and dealt with the aftermath at Joint Task Force Guantanamo.
Mr. Atkins.
Well, I'm pro-life.
That's why we put out a voting rights plan that will provide access to so many. The first part of that is within the first week I'm in office. I will sign an executive order that automatically restores voting rights to all nonviolent felons, and it does it immediately.
Well, as Attorney General, I'm just stand up for your Second Amendment rights and your constitutional rights. And as I've said publicly before, and as I filled out in gun surveys, including the NRA survey, which I have an A rating from the NRA, I believe due process needs to happen. I don't think it's fair or legal or constitutional to just have people come, make a complaint, and then have someone take your guns away. That's against your Second Amendment. It's against due process. So I am always going to err on the side of due process when it comes to your constitutional rights.
Well, thank you very much.
Hey, thank you.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Mr. Atkins.
Well, I'm pro-life. Future. I'm glad it was bipartisan. There's still a lot of work to be done in that bill. Thank you, Mr. Young.
Let me tell you what I do not support. I do not support arming teachers in the name of safety.
Through graduation from high school, whether you determine that you're going to go into college or trade school or just into the workforce, you're a veritable expert on the Constitution. And hopefully having to focus on that will encourage people to recognize the importance of exercising their franchise, how much blood has been spilled for it, and to really be more proactive citizens. Well, I think it's important for voters to know that if you want to uncover the full depth of corruption, or at least the allegations of such in the current administration, then it's imperative that I get elected. If Donald Trump was not elected president,
to build a better Kentucky and to provide the kind of jobs that our people need and deserve.
Where we can create the kind of jobs that not only have the promise of keeping our young people here, but have the promise of down the road being a destination where our grandchildren can remain. But to do that, we've got to have new leadership, unwavering.
Mr. Atkins.
Well, I'm pro-life.
Mr. Atkins.
Well, I'm pro-life.
Added student loan debt, and many of them have had to cut programs as well. What policies would you implement to make college more affordable? Begin with Mr. Atkins.
Well, the policies that I would look at with the university in my district, Morehead.
my parents are retired Jefferson County public school teachers and small business owners, and I am the eldest of their 4 children. My 2 brothers are police officers with the Louisville Metropolitan Police Department, serving as detectives.
You can't have criminal justice reform without decriminalizing small amounts of marijuana, because this is a policy that is often racist in its application.
Thank you.
Kentucky has had success attracting businesses through some aggressive tax credits as well as even direct investments. But some of those incentives have come under fire. When it comes to economic development, where is the line between an incentive and a giveaway? Mr. Young, you can go first.
I think that the race to the bottom among the states is a short-term, short-sighted strategy. States compete with each other to see how many tax breaks they can give to companies that promise to locate here. And they're talking about large corporations.
Created in renewable energy, that we can make Kentucky relevant to the opportunities of the 21st century. Ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, I want my administration to be measured by this metric. Did we leave a Kentucky a better place where our kids and grandchildren can be expected to stay here and realize their version of the American dream and enjoy real prosperity?
Nett did all of this after leaving his roots in Kentucky to work in the Secret Service and later the CIA and in Afghanistan. During his 2-minute sit-down, Nett says that the greatest sense of urgency in his mind is to clean up voter rolls, especially with the ongoing lawsuit with current Secretary of State Allison Lundergan Grimes. Nett also cites the recent election of President Donald Trump as an example of how a change in political party has resulted in uncovering allegations of corruption. Nett says that he seeks to do the same here in Kentucky if elected to Secretary of State.
Probably on 5 different occasions, I have voted for legislation in the Kentucky House of Representatives. I've worked with Representative Jesse Crenshaw, Representative Darrell Owens, and now representatives who now are sponsoring another piece of legislation that when you pay your debt to society, you ought to have those felonies removed and be able to vote, to get a job, and be able to join society again. We have passed that through the House in big numbers, 80-something to 15, and it's been killed in the Senate. It needs to pass, and it needs to pass now.
I'm a native Kentuckian, born and raised in Louisville. I grew up in the Holy Family Catholic Parish, graduated from St. Xavier High School, began my college career at the University of Louisville, and ultimately graduated with a BA in History from American Military University in Virginia.
I'm going to work to make sure every single Kentuckian gets to vote, because that's the only way that the politicians serve the people and not the other way around.
Time. Mr. Edlin.
A debt paid is a debt paid. And as governor, I will lead from the front on a comprehensive criminal justice reform package. At its foundation is the restoration of voting rights to felons who have paid their debt to society.
Thank you. Mr. Young.
I agree with my 3 colleagues up here. I'm a strong supporter of the restoration of voting rights for former felons. I would make an exception in the case of people who have been convicted of felony election fraud. So if Mr. Edlin, Mr. Beshear get indicted by the FBI and convicted, they'll have to wait for the next governor before someone will pardon them. What am I talking about?
Early voting that needs to take place in Kentucky. This is one of the toughest states in America as far as access to voting. We're one of the most restrictive. The initiative that I rolled out early on was to loosen that and allow Kentuckians to go to the ballot box. And hopefully that we have an economy to where these children, when they grow up, will be able to live in a community that will be able to provide the kind of job that will pay that living wage and allow them to live in the communities that they choose. That would be my definition of being pro-life.
There's little to no policy role that the Secretary of State plays in job creation or economic development or even business filings. It's all automatic. So number one, we've got to have a sense that integrity's been restored. This office should be boring. It shouldn't be in the headlines. I cannot think in my lifetime of a stronger...
Thank you. If you're just happening by, you're watching the Kentucky debate featuring the Democratic candidates for governor in the primary that is coming up in Kentucky on May 21st, next Tuesday. Next question. Do you support restoration of voting rights for felons? Should there be an approval process or should it be automatic? Mr. Beshear.
Voting is the bedrock of our society, and it's far too hard for so many families.
To design specific solutions that work to meet the unique needs of diverse communities. This is incredibly important because if we get it right, we can build a Kentucky in which all our people, particularly our young people, are put on a path to self-sufficiency and prosperity early in life. But when we fail to prepare them for our education system, we're failing ourselves in the long run. As governor, I'll make sure we get it right.
And you're from Ohio. There were people who voted in Jefferson County and in Hamilton County, Ohio. That's election fraud. There's already a plan that's been approved by the U.S. Supreme Court because it's been litigated. And that's the model we're going to follow here in Kentucky with some modifications. We're going to look at voters who have been dormant for 2 federal election cycles or 8 years. And we're going to send them a prepaid postage mailer, so we're not accused of a poll tax. They don't have to pay for a stamp, and just ask for a return, meaning, are you still alive?
Mr. Atkins.
You know, Shannon, my mother, God rest her soul, she was a Head Start teacher. Many years ago, Head Start was 3- and 4-year-old children. And it was expanded at that time in all communities across Kentucky through the community action agencies, and it was an unbelievable program and unbelievable opportunity for 3- and 4-year-old children. Now we're calling it pre-K.
That's a legacy that's good for our state, is good for our kids, and it's good for mine.
Mr. Edlin.
I want the enduring legacy of my time as your governor to be that we successfully came together and built a modern Kentucky. That we built a Kentucky where, regardless of who you're born to or what side of the tracks you come from,
the process works. To be entirely frank, the policy-making authority of the Secretary of State's office is really in the election field.
Mr. Atkins.
Well, I'm pro-life.
Mr. Young.
The question that every registered Democrat in Kentucky really wants to know is who can beat Matt Bevin in November. 2 of us can do it. Rocky Adkins can beat Matt Bevin in November because he's a good, strong, honest Democrat who works hard and has tremendous experience in the General Assembly. I can beat Matt Bevin on the strength of my platform and the strength of my will. If you tend toward more conservative, Rocky's the best choice. If you are more progressive, then you should vote for me on May 21st. The 2 crooks will be totally unable to beat Matt Bevin in November.
McCracken County native Michael G. Adams says he knew he had a knack for politics early on watching his heroes, such as Ronald Reagan, Jack Kemp, and other Republican leaders. At the young age of 16, the Kentuckian volunteered for the Bush Quayle 92 campaign and got hooked. Adams explained his background in his 2-minute sit-down and says he was the first college graduate on either side of his family. His studies continued at Harvard Law School with the goal to become an election lawyer for Republicans. During his interview, Adams elaborated on his platform and said that he is the most qualified to be the chief election official in the state of Kentucky. He says that with all the turmoil with the current administration,
and is fighting a national effort to tear it away. We all talk about opioids, but I'm the only one with a track record of actually getting it done and better protecting our families. And we all talk about transparency because we have a governor that is personally enriching himself. But as we stand here tonight, I'm the only candidate that's produced his 2018 tax returns that tells you how he made his money the very year before we're running. Folks, you are owed that. After what we've lived through, we have to walk the walk on transparency. I will always be straight with you.
Have you had enough? Have you had enough of literally the same old folks making the same old tired talking points who are trying to build a future for you by only giving you that which you have always gotten? That is insufficient leadership in a time of unprecedented economic, cultural, and technological change. Give to a governor the power to build the future, but make sure you've elected a governor who knows what it looks like.
Mr. Atkins.
I am Rocky Adkins, and I'm the proud Democratic leader of the Kentucky House. Spent most of my adult life in public service, and I'm proud of my public service. I mention that to you because my years in the Kentucky House, being the Budget Committee chair of different subcommittees, being the majority leader for the 13 and a half years and now the minority leader, it's given me the experience of being on that House floor to debate the issues over those years. But to go toe-to-toe with Matt Bevin over this last 3.5 years of his bad agenda. It's given me the experience to understand how to write a budget. It's given me the experience to understand how to make state government work across Kentucky. It's given me the experience to have the relationships in the super-controlled Republican House and Senate of how to get things done through those relationships and friendships. But I bring the vision that's needed for Kentucky as well. The vision to build a new economy in this Commonwealth of Kentucky.
So our whole platform is Team Kentucky, because this is not about Andrew English, and we realize that what works in Jefferson County doesn't work in Madison County, doesn't work in Lee County. And we're building a platform that is going to be subservient to the counties and the county clerks and be their messenger in Frankfort. That's kind of my idea of platform for the Secretary's office.
To make sure that we can create a new economy of tomorrow and capture the new jobs of tomorrow. To look in the industries, as I mentioned, a highly skilled, a highly trained workforce that would create a 21st century economy with a 21st century workforce. To take those economies and those new advanced industrial manufacturing opportunities into regions, to lift up regions of Kentucky and keep the economic engines of Kentucky running strong. To make sure we could fully fund public education and to make sure that we could lift up every child's hope and opportunity and take hope and opportunity back to the regions that have been impacted.
Mr. Young.
The legacy I would want to leave would be a cooperative Commonwealth.
Things primarily, I helped draft regulations for investigating suspected terrorists. I also worked on high-level interagency and interstate prosecution of child pornographers. But I also represent other Republican and conservative organizations and individuals. I'm Vice President Pence's political attorney. Honestly, you can't look at anyone else in the Commonwealth and say they're better qualified than I am.
Yes, that it can be. We have to take advantage of the $17 billion of economic development that has come into the Commonwealth and make sure that entrepreneurial spirit stays here in Kentucky. This office, you have to have the support of the clerks, and you have to work with the county clerks, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who run the elections day to day. I'm a good team builder, and I will put the right people in the right places. So I'll have the right person who's in charge of election, who will work with the clerks. I'll have the right person in charge of the economic side and business development side.
And as opposed to just talking about it in the campaign, I have a record of action. It was in 2017, when no one was running for anything, that the legislature passed an unconstitutional bill attacking reproductive rights. I refused to defend it. And you know what? They attacked me for it. But it was the right thing to do at a time when no one was watching. This last session, they passed unconstitutional bills, and I wrote them a letter that I made public that said what you're doing is wrong, it's unconstitutional. The state will be sued, we will lose, and we will owe tens of thousands of dollars.
Mr. Young.
Yeah, I also support preschool, pre-K, education programs, Head Start, and all that. I have long supported the Kentucky Education Reform Act, KERA, which was in the previous wave before the federal No Child Left Behind Act came along. I think KERA was an excellent reform. It put Kentucky on a good path in the entire realm of education, but then along came No Child Left Behind with its excessive emphasis on standardized testing and teaching to the test and punishing schools when their students happen to be low income and have problems because they're hungry. It is unjust to punish a teacher.
Mr. Atkins.
Well, I'm pro-life.
So the cooperative commonwealth will get us away from class warfare, which is what the Republican Party and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce have been pushing. They want to eliminate all unions forever. And that would be a worse society than we have now.
Thank you. Mr. Beshear.
I'd like to leave a legacy of being the governor who helped our families right away. Stripped away from them and their children, I want to be the governor that helped them protect their health care right away. For those that are worried about their pensions, which they earn by giving decades of their lives to public service.
Jobs that we have here today. Economic development incentives used in other ways to bring jobs that don't pay that living wage, that don't look to areas of this state that need to have their economies rebuilt. Regions of this state that are hurting because of downturn in economies that's cost.
The real driver of our economy and the real source of new jobs and better jobs in Kentucky is the small and medium-sized business sector. I am not an enthusiast of tax breaks to corporations, some of which may not even be around 10 years from now. They may have left already. And so we need to make the economy of Kentucky more egalitarian. Our strongest plank in our platform is to defend and strengthen unions to bring democracy to the workplace.
There's little to no policy role that the Secretary of State plays in job creation or economic development or even business filings. It's all automatic. So number one, we've got to have a sense that integrity's been restored. This office should be boring. It shouldn't be in the headlines.
To the western Kentucky river towns, a Rocky Adkins administration will make sure we recruit the kind of jobs our people need and deserve and lift up all regions of this great Commonwealth of Kentucky.
It's like robotics, where every day someone in a city loses a job on a line because of that next generation of automation. Let's lead in automation. And then there's healthcare. Healthcare is not just a basic human right, and I have a plan at andybeshear.com so where we can sign everyone up and reduce your costs. But it's one of the fastest growing parts of our world economy. We're going to invest in all those areas to build a big, bright future that our children deserve.
The issue in Kentucky isn't that our people aren't working hard enough. It's that the work they're...
Look at what we would not know about the inner workings of the FBI and the NSA, the CIA, etc. Some of these agencies that I've served, what they were doing to meddle in an election. So I think it's important that Republicans get me through this primary. I get elected in November, and I can pursue that investigation in the Secretary of State's office. If I'm the nominee of our party in the fall, I will be able to say that I'm more qualified, not just to be Secretary of State, but I'm more qualified to be Miss America than Heather French Henry is to be Secretary of State.
You're watching Election 2019 coverage from WBONTV.com.
Thousands of jobs to some of our regions of Kentucky. Infuriates me to see a depopulation of some regions of Kentucky. So to keep the economic engines of this state running, we got to also use these incentives to attract the jobs of the future while we fight.
Hello, I'm Carl Trump Nett, Republican candidate for Kentucky Secretary of State, and I'm asking for your vote in the May 2019 Republican primary. It's not enough to vote Republican. You've got to vote for the right Republican. I am the right Republican.
There is no future in low-skill, low-wage jobs, but there is a future in building the economy of a modern Kentucky, and I know how to do it. I've brought together a coal company with a renewable energy engineering firm to build what will be the largest solar installation in Kentucky by a factor of 10. We can create thousands of renewable energy jobs, jobs that by their very definition can't be exported to China or Mexico.
Incentives are important to Kentucky for us to be able to compete with surrounding states and in this global economy. Economic development incentives, though, need to be used in a manner that we're attracting the kind of jobs that our people need and deserve and retaining those.
Mr. Atkins.
Well, I'm pro-life.
The party was very desirous of having someone like him in charge of the voter rolls because, as he put it, we don't need any more Rand Pauls or Thomas Masseys getting elected. Well, I was offended by this, and sensing that, Mr. Adams again pivoted. This time, again, trying to impress upon me his bona fides, telling me that he was going to run for the U.S. Senate from his second term as Secretary of State. He told me that Mitch McConnell would run for re-election in 2020, and indeed he has since announced those very intentions, and further telling me that McConnell was going to retire in 2026. I don't know if Senator McConnell knows this, but this is Adams' plan. So I let Adams know that had been true.
About violating the Kentucky Democratic Party bylaws, which prohibit the party itself, the party structure, from taking sides in any Democratic primary election. I've been running since 2014 for various offices. And every time the party violates its own bylaws and rigs the election, Kentucky Democratic Party will disappear from the face of the earth if it doesn't clean up its act and end corruption at the top of the party.
Just recently, I've submitted an amicus brief in front of the Sixth Circuit supporting these reproductive rights and saying what Matt Bevin is doing is wrong. That is a real record. As governor, I will roll back the attacks that he has made on reproductive freedom, and I will veto every one of these bills coming out of the legislature.
Mr. Edelin.
You cannot build a modern Kentucky unless you recognize the full equality of women. And you can't recognize the full equality of women unless you trust them to make their own health care decisions. Matt Bevin and this cabal in Frankfort have brought us to the precipice of the most radical anti-woman agenda that we've ever seen in Kentucky, maybe even in America. We are on the precipice of being the first state in the country to institute a de facto complete ban on a woman's right to reproductive health care. We can't tolerate this, and this isn't just about making sure this clinic stays open. It's about making sure that women in Kentucky have access to a constitutional right that they have been granted by the Supreme Court. This is about making sure that Kentucky moves in the right direction, and it's about making sure that you elect a ticket in this race that is, from top to bottom, unapologetically supportive of a woman's right to make her own health care decisions. The stakes are simply too high for mealy-mouthed politicians who are afraid to lead on this important issue.
I believe that the Right to Life movement, its goal since that Supreme Court decision has been to make all abortions illegal after conception. That is a failed strategy. Countries and regions of the world that have tried making their abortion laws unbelievably strict have seen an actual increase in the abortion rate, not a decrease. If the Republicans succeed, they turned it into a partisan issue in eliminating the last Planned Parenthood clinic in Kentucky, the abortion rate will go up, but more women will die in unsafe abortion procedures.
Mr. Beshear.
I'm pro-choice, and I support Roe v. Wade.
Fight for the jobs of today, preparing ourselves for the jobs of tomorrow. Our number one export industry happens to be the aerospace industry. To be able to diversify the coal
they're doing doesn't pay enough. And when we utilize state-based incentives to bring companies here that don't pay a living wage or offer benefits, it has the net result of driving wages down. Ladies and gentlemen, as your governor, I will end the era of chasing an economy that simply doesn't exist anymore.
But one of our first initiatives of myself and Stephanie Horn was to basically initiate a program that would lengthen the hours of allowing people to vote from 6 to 8.
We can create those jobs here, and I don't need any incentives to do it. I just need the government to get out of the way. If you want to build a modern Kentucky and an economy that works for all of our people, elect somebody who has created jobs and knows how to do it.
Mr. Atkins.
By the baggage of the past. I'm proud to be that candidate for governor.
Mr. Atkins.
Bill, it's good to be with you. Thank you for having me today. Not only can I beat Matt Bevin, I will beat
our great Commonwealth. Let me start by saying that Democrats win when we have a view of the future that is bold, that is progressive, that is so comprehensive that regular people can see themselves prospering in that vision.
Well, the skeptic will say that those who vote, vote, and those who don't, don't. One of the lesser-known roles of Secretary of State is Chief Advocate for Civic Engagement. So what I'm doing is I'm working with members of the American Legion and the Military Order of World Wars to focus on bringing civics and history back to the classrooms of Kentucky, and as part of that, focusing on the Constitution, starting with first graders. Not giving the whole thing, but a piece of it, so that the time you progress.
If you look at our website, Young for Kentucky, young4ky.com, you'll see the outlines of an economy and a society where working people have more say at the workplace. We are supporting worker-owned businesses, cooperatives, and strengthening unions, all in order to level the playing field between the individual worker and the huge corporation or huge bureaucracy that is negotiating with you over your wage and your benefits and worker safety.